facious for 10 years. Probably don't remember him because they tried to hide that little news fact too. I was the crazy mayor that wanted to secede from Hennepin County and the first one to do a drone ban. I'm that crazy guy. But I also exactly have my own computer consulting business, and my computer consulting business is kind of atypical. So don't let my looks deceive you. They're kind of truthful. I'm a nerd, but I have a computer consulting business, but I had a political science degree. I did so well with my political science degree that I got paid $3,000 a year for 10 years to be mayor, that I think I may have broken even. So I have exceeded expectations in the world. But my computer consulting business is that I'm kind of too stupid to say no when a customer approaches me with a problem that they're having. And so I'm kind of like Susan, where we are rabbit hole hunters. We see something and we're like, well, that's interesting. What is that about? What does this lead to?
No rabbit's gone as deep as we go.
No. We tread where no rabbits been before. It's actually true.
The rabbits follow us.
No. Because we're too dumb to bring a flashlight. So along the way, we stumbled into a territory that we found was just unbelievable. It's called the swamp wash. We have found monsters lurking. We have studied and analyzed how these creatures manipulate the election, manipulate the laws, how they really don't care about what they say they do, but they don't. So we have decided, and we started working on more stories because we really started digging deep, all the different crops around the state, in the Midwest. And then we're like, holy cow, look at the elections. We should start there. And then...
You thought milfoil and mollusks were a problem?
Oh, yeah. Simon. That's a new creature feature. Just imagine. But as we kind of went through this journey, I have to rewind a little bit. So I kind of started the journey when Keith Ellison, you know, the top law enforcement officer of the state, when he proposes an interesting idea. What if we mailed out all the ballots to everybody in the state? So I called up a good old friend, Andy Seelig from Minnesota Voter Alliance, right? Because he's one of the go-to guys out there that's just like, he's always thinking like, hey, no, don't try and push this. We have laws, follow those, right? So he's always kind of on the battlefront. So back in August, when Keith Ellison kind of made that announcement with the sidekick, Steve Simon, I was like, hey, Andy, send me the data. Do you have anything? Because I know you're always out there collecting the data from the Secretary of State. And he's like, well, yeah, I got it. What do you want to do? And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll set up a deal with you. If you give me the data, I'll analyze it for free, because what can't I do as a non-Minnesota resident? I can't ask for the data. But you can ask for the data. It only costs, what is it?
$46.
$46 per copy. So that's education piece number one.
What data? Would you tell us?
Oh, I like that question. That's actually really good. I shouldn't have skipped over that. So there's actually a little piece of data on the Minnesota Secretary of State's website. It's called the Minnesota Voter History Data Set. And in it, it contains all of the voter registration information and all of their voter history.
It's a statewide voter registration system.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's start thinking about what are some dystopian things that could happen. I mean, how many of you worked with data ever before? Entered in a spreadsheet or anything like that? Okay. How many of you seen garbage data? Oh God, it always happens, doesn't it? Right. You kind of laugh because I'm kind of wondering if you're like an accountant somewhere, you deal with like mailing lists. Have you seen, or I mean GOP lists? Right. So what are some of the common things? They mistype something, right? Would it surprise you to find out that there were over 20,000 addresses in the state of Minnesota that didn't have a house number?
Oh.
Would it surprise you that there were 2,000 students at Carleton College that didn't have an apartment number?
Oh.
So what would that get you to start thinking? So how would a post office deliver to a mailbox that doesn't exist? How would a resident student who's in charge of, I'm sorry, I walked off the camera. How would a resident assistant who's in charge of distributing the mail, you think they know everybody that's there in the dorm? I don't think so.
Or should students live at Kaufman Union at the University of Minnesota?
Right. Or should ballots be delivered to an actual, I don't know, professor's suite at the college?
How about a parking lot?
An empty one?
For sure, an empty one.
How about a weeded one? Does that count?
I mean, well, it depends on the weed.
Ooh. Is it the good stuff or the bad stuff? So, no, this literally happened. Lawyers' offices, business offices, PO boxes.
UPS stores?
Yes. What can Brown do for you? I always wonder. So the other thing too that was really dystopian too is, would you ever believe that it got so bad that you could actually look at a database and kind of look at some of the registrations? There's like another whole separate column, like, I live here, but mail my ballot here. Oh, you know where I'm going, right? There you go. Okay, so here's where I'm going. So imagine, I really hate to call it elder abuse, but it's a simpler. So when you have Alzheimer's, so if you go to another cool little place that you can actually download the information without asking for it, the Department of Health actually has a Excel spreadsheet that you can download that lists all of the senior residence care facilities, and then there's a little column over here that kind of shows which ones are potentially dementia or Alzheimer care facilities. Oh, I don't know, in outstate Minnesota, there were actually quite a few residents, 93 of them, that actually lived at 5 different facilities getting mailed to the same PO box. Maybe something.
They changed the rules. They changed the rules for people with cognitive impairments. I have 2 children with cognitive impairments who had not previously been able to vote, and guardianship switched. And we testified that they are not capable of voting. That cognitively, no way could they understand to vote, and their rights to vote were restored by the judge. Now, we wouldn't have them vote, their guardian wouldn't want them to vote, because you'd actually be voting, we literally said in court, we would vote for them, whoever voted for them, who helped them would be voting twice, because they would be incapable. But it's actually a movement to restore voting rights for people with cognitive impairments, and people with, it's amazing, like they're just grabbing votes anywhere they can add them in, right?
So this is
People who can vote should be able to vote, but
So, you know, in regards to helping people, did you know that you can vouch for 8 people in your precinct? It's 8, sorry. But are any of you nurses or work at a healthcare facility? You do. Guess what? You've got the double card. Did you know that you can vouch for unlimited people at that facility?
they changed the rules for the quota.
Oh, yeah. You didn't know that? Okay. Well, now you know. So you should actually be helping people, right? Help cancel it out. So I'm just going to flat out say, based upon your reaction, and that was my gut reaction when I kind of actually, so can I call that voter fraud? Not when it's legal. It's actually in state statute. Yeah, I'm serious. So this is what we need to start pounding your feet and calling the legislators today, every single day, until they adjourn and tell them you need to strike that out.
But also I think it's about educating people, because let's just say that even with COVID, there were people talking to their family members, and I mean, I heard this from people myself, who would say, I talked to my mom in the nursing home and she's got dementia, right? I mean, not me, but people saying this, right? And she said somebody helped her vote. And she thinks she voted for Biden. Right? and so what I'm saying is that, but this is the point, right? That people need to be talking to the facilities where they have loved ones, to be saying clearly, we don't want this to be happening in your facility, right? Right. That if there isn't COVID anytime there's an election happening, people need to be helping their family members, right, to fill out their ballot if they can. So that if you have a family member that can vote, help make sure that they get the ballot and that they're not taken advantage of. Because if they can fill out their own ballot, they should be doing that, right? And not having some nurse's aide or some administrator go through and vote that ballot for them, right?
So now we get into, so sorry to kind of do the data download on you, real fast, but now I'm gonna make it even more confusing. So this is the wonderful straight edge timeline that we follow in Minnesota for election law, which will kind of preview how we kind of teamed up together. So did you know that we actually have 47 days of voting? Actually, that's a lie, it's 57. Because you still get 10 days absentee ballots to trickle in. So, but...
Often not postmarked that way.
Right. So, and so we have these expectations that, you know, and so this is what we really have to really educate people, is like, I need to tell you, it's really terrible. So we have this expectation that Minnesota's nice, it's this great state, and we do things above board, and we have this professional class that's just there to make sure that everything is just awesome, right? I'm here to tell you that the base level of Minnesota is absolute garbage. How do we know this? It's because, and I have to tell you this, when I moved...
He moved to South Dakota,
Yeah, so
so
she
that's
calls me.
part of this, right?
Yeah,
Like,
so-
he's like, it's like a bad Iowa joke coming from South Dakota.
It really is. I'm here to tell you it can be better. I'm here from the land of gnomes to tell you that it can actually run better. So the beautiful thing of it is that, oh my gosh, after I left, how pissed I was, how long I've been ripped off. So you remember the little things like NINLARs? The database, right? Yep. The same thing happened here. It's absolute garbage. And as we go through the story, I'll actually show you some of the pieces that will just kind of blow your mind, like, seriously? So we have this expectation, and I just want to show you this. This is how most Minnesota voters feel.
Look, it's like turning dials.
Right? So, I didn't prepare for that. That was awesome. Thank you, Governor Walz. You just wrecked my
Whoa!
I'm getting over that one.
That was a good one.
All right. So the reality is, so election day, the banks have been lying to you for years. So, you know, when you get that free calendar from the bank and it says election day is here, the first Tuesday of the...
Right.
Okay, well, now it's 47 because of absentee, right? So instead of having one day to get it all done and cheat, you got 47 days. You know, imagine what you can do with that kind of
Are
time,
any of
right?
you election judges? Yeah? So do you remember when election day was an election day? Like when it was one day. Remember election day, it used to be a day,
Yeah,
right? It was hard to cheat a lot
yeah,
when it was one day, because at the end of the day, they'd have to quick sign the poll book a few times, shove a few ballots in. You know, collectively, it could be a lot. You know, if you went through all 4,000 some precincts and a couple of votes here, you know, you could get 10, 15, 20,000 ballots, right? But, you know, it was a lot, but, I mean, you know, you have to really spread it out over the whole state. Because how many could you do at the end of the day, right? But I mean, now, we have a long time to work on this, right? It's a whole different world now.
So as we go through the timeline here, you know, it's like, okay, so September 18th, November 2nd, you can vote by mail or in person. Then the county boards, they can start counting the ballots. What they were supposed to be able to do was kind of look at the ballot, the envelopes, separate the envelopes from the ballots, and then kind of do their little counts to kind of go, we received 5 of these. We're going to update the absentee voter system to basically say that we received it, so that way on the website, the voter would know, hey, we got it, you're good to go, your vote's going to count, right? That was actually kind of a cool thing.
Only accepting, no counting, right? Have any of you voted absentee? Who voted absentee? So there's an outer envelope,
Yeah.
there's an inner envelope, so they get the ballot, right? They track it. So you send a form in, I want my ballot, then they send it to you, they track it. So you can go, oh, it's on the way, then you get it, then you do all the rules, then you send it back, then they track it, then it's then it's received, then they can open it at a certain point. Then when they open it, then they say, oh, okay, yeah, you followed the rules, now it's accepted, then they have to say it's accepted. Then they, at some point, can open it, not count it, but they can open it so that they can save time on election night when they can count it. They can't
Wait,
count.
were they supposed to count those like after the polls closed, right?
Yeah, no counting. The law says
And
they
clock, right?
count on election night after polls close. So it even says they may not observe the ballot. They may not observe it. They can count it on. so may not observe it, so they can put it in a ballot box when they open them, and then at the end of each day, they have to take them out, and then they numerically have to verify the number that they took out of the box, like 1, 2, 3, may not observe them, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, there's 372, right? And then they have to count the outer envelopes, because that's an election material. Oh, 373, we lost a ballot. We got a problem, count them again, 1, 2, 3, 4, do not observe them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oh yeah, counts on, we're good. Put them in a box together. They have to be together, because it's all election materials. Seal the box, every day, for all how many days? 47 days. All days they must do that. No counting, that means no tabulating, because tabulating is what? Tabulating is what? Tabulating is counting, that means counting.
You're smart.
Okay, you guys are smart. You should go work for the government.
No, seriously, we need to work for the government.
I know, someone's got to do it. Okay.
So she's exactly right. So that's part of the process. Then we get to election day. Normally, we show up. There's the poll book. I'm on there. Oh, hey, I just moved in. Can I still register? Oh yeah, that's my neighbor. Come on in. I know you moved there, didn't you? Go ahead and vouch. You know, not a problem. Okay, so that's kind of the normal stuff.
Can we do the college demonstration?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm an election judge and you be the nice college student and come and ask and tell me you need to vote, but you don't have anything with you, nothing.
I'm here to vote.
Are you registered to vote?
Somewhere. I should be.
But not here?
It doesn't matter. I want to vote.
Well, what's your name?
Biden. I'm voting for Biden. I want to vote.
I don't know if your name. Do you have anything with you, like a document that says your address?
No, I don't need it.
Okay, you need someone to vouch for you. Do you know anybody?
I know everybody.
You need to go find somebody.
Fine. Ryan, get over here.
He
Put the
did it
beer
wrong.
down. Come
He
here.
did it wrong. He did it wrong. He's not doing it right. So he's supposed to say to me he doesn't know anybody. And then I'm going to say to him, because I've literally observed this
that's
at
true.
multiple colleges.
Right.
Multiple
She's
colleges.
done. She's tired.
Here's what they do.
Allegedly.
Like, let's say Duluth. This happened to me in Duluth a couple of years ago. I'm watching. I can't say a word, because you're not allowed to say a word. It's a felony or something. So you just watch, and then I watch the election judge say to this poor college student, who knows nobody, supposedly.
By the way, I just moved from Wisconsin.
Just go outside and find somebody. There's going to be somebody out there. Just go find anybody to come find here and vouch for you. Just go outside. And he'll say, I just don't know anybody around here. Just go outside and look for somebody. I'm thinking to myself, you know all those guys in the tie-dye t-shirts that like have Mao on them? That's who she's talking about, dope. Go. Right? You know the Mao? Where if you look, come on.
Che Guevara.
Yeah.
Right.
They're being pretty obvious, buddy. They got the shirt, or they got the Hope shirt. You know what I mean?
Oh, we
They're
forgot
all
something.
outside.
We forgot an important piece of the law. Okay. In the law, did you know that absentee ballots, there's actually a very specific piece that once they receive it, they're supposed to immediately enter it into it. What's the mom rule for immediately? So when you tell your kids to go clean their room, immediately, what does that mean? Is that next week? No. Now? What does now mean? I mean, it's kind of fuzzy. So I'll get to that point a little bit later, and you're going to see it real obviously, because remember those dates, right? Okay, so must immediately. It's actually law, so that's kind of where our law is.
Immediately.
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 Must immediately.
Must
It's actually in the law like 3 times.
It is.
Like it's so important that every place they talk about the ballots being accepted,
In
it
that one
says
section of 4 lines.
immediately.
It must be.
So it's every time they talk about which people are accepting them, it actually says immediately. Like now. Do it now. Like you accept it and go, oh yeah, I accepted it, I better go make the check. Because the voters who voted have to be able to track their ballot, right? So therefore you have to be able to go and make sure that it's been accepted.
And for you guys that are there at election day as judges, when you're going through the voter rolls, what's supposed to be there if a voter voted absentee? What?
An A.
Oh, perfect.
A what?
An A. That means they already voted. So what should happen if they want to come in and vote again?
Chase them out.
Oh, okay.
Quick call and say we've got a potential felon here. Oops.
Right. So, I'm just going to say 1,100, and so Minnesotans voted more than once. All right.
Well, actually, what we don't know is, did they vote more than once, or did some other felonious person vote for them? Because I think here's the problem. I know. Some other felonious person, you heard me here say it.
I know. Or there's incompetence at the data entry level that they just selected the wrong order.
They typed in the whole wrong name and the whole wrong everything. Imagine, I mean, yep.
How many did you say did that? How many?
Over 1,100.
Some people actually voted more than twice.
Oh, one guy accomplished it 4 times. He's awesome. He's my hero. 603.
I mean, you know, overachievers. Right?
Allegedly. So the reason I have to say allegedly is because we have the data, we know Steve has the data, and we know that, my buddy Steve, and the counties have the data. I'm just curious why the counties and Steve haven't pursued it to either A, clean up the data, or pursue it, or, just do things the right way, because I'm just a dumb guy who's not in the state that, if they actually did things right, what would normally happen? No.
I mean, it's a real problem, right? I mean, this is the problem with absentee voting, right? The problem with absentee voting is, once there's a mistake made, we can't reconcile it, right? And this isn't even the biggest problem. This is just a little problem.
Oh, yeah.
This is just a little piece. This is like not even the problem.
I know, that's why we started with a lower number, so that way you guys could get excited.
This is a distraction. this right here.
We need to build up,
This is like, this problem is just a big distraction.
Yeah, so you'll forget that number soon. Don't worry
What
about it.
number are we at right now? Like 25,000?
Oh, no. Bigger. I'm going to lead through some other numbers too. It's going to be really fun. But I'm going to get to one of the big numbers that's up here on the slide here pretty soon, because you've been kind of seeing it for a while. So as we continue going this way, so as we have that, remember that slide, the expectation that we have high expectations, just to remind you, because I don't want you to forget, this one here. So that's how we expect the Minnesota elections to work. So, all right, so we believe that, right? You're not going to once I'm done with you here today. So, but we know that 58% of Minnesotans voted absentee. That's a record.
Well, we wait.
Actually, allegedly.
Yes, so whenever you're talking about potential criminal activity, we are always supposed to use the word allegedly.
Yeah. Allegedly, we were #1 in the country.
We were allegedly, can I want to say one thing too this is just one.
Are you done with allegedly?
No.
Okay. Allegedly.
I think it's important to say this, that do you all remember when our governor referred to us as one of the most racist states in the country? Do you remember that?
Yes, remember.
He did. He referred, when all this stuff happened in the riots and stuff, he basically told us that we were extremely racist.
We're all racist.
And what's amazing and interesting to me, because I have children I have Native American kids, and I have a child with African American, I have a child who's Asian. So I'm going to say we have I believe that there is a lot of racism in our world, in our healthcare system, no question about it. And we have a lot of problems. We've made a lot of progress. There are problems. We would be foolish to say there aren't some issues. Okay, there are.
Okay, I'm just done with this. So,
But
so
I want to say this. In the history of America,
Yeah.
when there is racism in a voting system, there is voter suppression.
Right.
So if we are, in fact, one of the most racist states in the country, how do we have the highest rate of voter turnout? I'm just asking the question for you to ponder that. Right?
Should I ask as the
How
token
stunning
minority?
is that? We
Because
are
I'm
both the
Hispanic, and I'll just tell you that that's just a pile of dumpster heap, and I'm sick and tired of hearing politicians tell us that minorities are too stupid, too lazy, can't get a voter ID. I'm sorry, but the bar should be up here that, you know what? We are all Americans, and we all have the same opportunity to go out there. You know what, Democrats? If you really cared, you would go out and get IDs for the people who are struggling. But because you don't, you're fools.
Yeah, so what I'm saying to you is this narrative.
Yeah.
They spin these narratives all the time to manipulate us. It's So when they want to say we're racist, we're racist. So we're number one in voter turnout, but we're the most racist. And I'm saying it's a narrative that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just a narrative that doesn't work. Could they just pick? Which is it? Right? So I'm just saying.
Absolutely. So now getting on with the
Go ahead.
data. So remember, the election was November 3rd, right? So I would kind of want to, how many of you would think that by the time the state canvassing board certifies an election, that they have all the data kind of settled by them, right? November 24th. Raise your hands if you think all the data would be in there and you would have an expectation that the voter histories are to the database and it would be.
How many of you get a final grade in a college course when you haven't turned in your final paper? Anybody? Does anybody get to do that? Do you get to graduate from college if you haven't? Do you get to graduate from high school
In a couple of years.
if you haven't turned in your work?
Yep.
Is that how that works?
So I want to present two paths here. There's this path here, which is the kind of the college path, which is, so if you were to present, or not even tell it, to your professors that are 2 Supreme Court justices and 2 judges from other courts within the state of Minnesota, and the 5th wheel is Steve Simon, which makes up your state canvassing board, you'll put that in your mind as an asterisk, because I'm going to come back to that later.
Hennepin County, by the way.
Okay, so then we get into the actual work going in. Hey guys, I'm turning in 61% of the data. What would that get you? What would that get you in college? Probably, because I've had some tough professors too, right? So the reality is, yeah, it happened. 38.9% of the data was missing. Actually, that's a little bit of a lie. Okay, so I have to put an asterisk here because that was the data that I had from the Secretary of State 5 days after they certified the election. So that's the data on November 29th. I think somebody needs to help her. She looks really
So,
sick.
and by the way, so to verify, so I filed a suit that it seek an injunction of the certification, right? Saying to the Supreme Court, here's all this evidence that they haven't done it right. There was not public
This is
participation.
where we start working together.
Right, there was no public participation. We have photographic evidence. We have all these problems in Dakota County where they didn't have data. We know in Dakota County, they were missing ballots, 800 ballots in one of the precincts. And the rules are that if you can't reconcile, you have to do
Well,
3
let's not call them rules.
law. Actual laws. I know, there's a law. There's a law. And in that law, that if you can't reconcile your counts, and it's a hand count, 1, 2, 3, 4, but you have a count, that if you can't do that, you must, by law, count 3 more precincts. That's a law, actually, a law. And that didn't happen in Dakota County. They were missing 800 ballots, no reconciliation, and they thought, shh, don't tell. Go ahead.
Which county are you alluding to?
Dakota County.
That wasn't an
Dakota County. By the way, just as a side note, actually had a couple of printers express shipped to them a week later from Dominion.
The next day.
Yeah, just coincidentally. Not that they needed them for months, but they did happen to get them. We have that confirmed by an email.
Expedited.
After the election?
After the election.
Day after.
They were supposed to get them for February in case they had the pot candidate, after the pot guy died, that they were supposed to have them for the February potential election with Kistner and Craig, but they, for some reason, had to get them expedited, right during that little PER time or whatever. But, so 800 ballots missing, not counted, and for some reason it seemed to make sense to Dakota County that they would just skip right over that and certify their county. And then it seemed to make sense to Steve Simon that we just skip right over that and certify our state election. And so we did seek an injunction, and Judge Dietzen was assigned to the case. And I was asked to submit a brief about latches and finality and mootness, and I did submit that, and we were waiting for a ruling from him on that. And on December 4th, he hadn't yet given us a decision, and Justice Gilday dismissed the case. Before Justice Dietzen issued a ruling, she said that I needed to have served all of the counties about the effort to stop the certification. But I wasn't seeking to stop the certification of those counties, I was seeking to have the actual canvassing board not certified. And so she dismissed it without Judge Dietzen making a ruling. But that would have meant we might have missed safe harbor, right? Which would have meant our electoral votes wouldn't have counted in Washington. That would have been sad, huh? And, so I'm just saying. So,
All four?
So, I'm just saying. So this is a really complicated process, right? And Rick and I are talking about things that people don't want to talk about.
Gilligan's on the ballot next year.
We need people to run as judges. Anyone?
Find them. It's actually important. This is no
Yeah,
joke.
probably the most important thing.
So the number okay, so I hate to really shock you right now. So the 38.9% represents 1.2 million ballots in total. But my argument to Susan was, so unfortunately they still have until December 15th statutorily to enter in all those voter histories. However, remember what I said about the absentee ballots? Must immediately. That number's 700,000.
Now think about
Did you hear that? 700,000. Oh, you want a more specific number? 732,000 is how many absentee mail-in ballots were not handled within the state law.
So the state will tell you that they have a special database over here for the absentee voters or
Aren't we
something.
a plain language state?
Well, we are.
So what does must immediately mean?
I know, it means, it really should be must be.
When the state says that there's the Minnesota Secretary of State's database, can I assume by plain language that that would just mean the database? So no matter how I request it, I should see that?
Well, nothing, I couldn't find any statute that actually says create a separate database for absentee ballots so that after the election you can then merge that separate database in with the real database. I couldn't find that in the statutes. I did try.
Right.
I couldn't actually find it because it doesn't really make sense to me that you're going to enter all that data in one database and then later on merge it into another database. Because you would think that since you already have a place to put the A, you just put the A in.
Oh,
Right?
by the way, there's actually procedure in the Secretary of State's manual that shows you how you look at the voter registration database, and it will show you the queue of absentee data that you just have to accept. It's
Yeah.
click, quick.
So, but one thing that could happen if you have a separate database is that you could hypothetically, allegedly, create a database where actual voters get put in the actual database, right? Hypothetically, actual voters get put in the actual database, but hypothetical not actual voters get put in the other database. And then if the actual real voters don't vote, then you would know which ones you could move over, allegedly, because then you wouldn't have double voters on election day.
Allegedly.
See what I mean?
Maybe 1,100.
Because if you actually hypothetically accidentally made a mistake and had one vote over here and over there, then you get that person who said, I didn't vote, right? So people who make mistakes and accidentally put a wrong voter over here too soon, and then the real voter shows up on election day. Now you have those people going, I did not vote. No, I didn't vote. I didn't vote, right? And that didn't happen. We had a lot of that.
Okay, I'm gonna digress here. And so how do I know that this allegedly happened? Okay, so I'm gonna let you in a little secret. I have 5 copies of the database from different dates. So one of the things that I noticed, so November 29th, December 13th, the 20th, December 27th, and January 31st. So normally what should happen in a database is that if somebody pops in on the first day, on the first set, they should be consistently going all the way across, right? Wrong! There were over 60,000 voters that kind of were here. They were here, gone, gone, gone. Or another miraculous one was not here, entered, gone, gone. Or how how many of you have worked with like address databases? Okay, so you're gonna love this one. So this is how bad it is. Okay, there's actually a couple situations where I can't actually tell what happened because a voter voted here on November 29th, and they lived in Mankato, and it shows that they voted in Mankato, but the way that they have the data is that you have the voter history with the complete address and everything, and then there's a separate table that basically just has 4 data elements. Date of the election, description of the election, and then the voter ID, and then the method that they voted, absentee precinct. So sometimes what happens when people move to another location, looks like they voted over here. They're so ridiculous that I can't actually tell where they potentially voted. Because if I didn't have the 5 databases, I wouldn't have seen that there's 140,000 people across the state that literally moved from one location on November 29th through January 31st. That's an incredible number.
Or how about this? or how about this paperwork problem? Rick is super sweet, innocent, 21-year-old college girl. Couldn't be nicer. He's
I'm transgender, I guess.
He's transitioning. And so
It's your right as a man.
So Rick, over here, he votes absentee on, let's say October 15th, okay, in Minneapolis, okay? And then he goes and registers to vote. He goes to vote on election day, let's say in Mankato. I'm going to pick on Mankato because they seem to have some problems. They go to Mankato, maybe register to it, or maybe he's a homeless person in Bloomington. Let's not even talk about that quite yet. We're going to get there. Yeah. So he goes someplace else, and on election day, okay? And they have this time, 6 weeks. They have 6 weeks to put in data from election day. Now, let me just ask you a quick question, Paul. Raise your hand. If you're a person who's entering data from people who registered to vote on election day, okay? So you're a data entry person, putting in data from people who registered to vote on election day, and there's a column that it says date registered. What day do you put in? Do you put in the registration date? Who puts the registration date in? The actual day they filled out the form. So November 3rd. Do you put that date in because that's the day they filled it out? Or do you put in the day that you enter it into the system? Okay? Do you put so who puts in the day they actually registered to vote and voted? Who puts that date? Okay?
Thank you.
Who puts in the date? Who puts in your government work? Okay. Who puts in the day that you put it in the system? The middle of December. Who does that?
Nobody.
You all just got fired, I think.
Yeah, because we have a lot of those where there are new registered voters that voted on November 3rd, but they have a registration date that far exceeds
In December.
January.
No, that's not right.
But it might look like they voted twice because they voted they voted P and they voted A.
That's right, we see that.
They voted P and A. See how you can cheat the system?
That's a First Amendment. They were trusting themselves.
Because if he does a search for P voters, they show up as P voters. If he does a search for A voters, they show up as A voters. See?
Yep.
See how we can cheat? It's what it's called is winning by 1,000 methods of cheating, right? 100 here, 200 there, 300
You caught that
there.
right, 1,000 cuts. Okay.
It's quite incredible.
Somebody thought through every detail.
You got it. And because, so I want to put the asterisk because you're really close on it. So what's one of the things that we traditionally do? They're cheating in this one area, right? So, allegedly. So, but when you actually look at the numbers, 1,100 isn't that bad. It's not going to affect an election. Go away. But what if you found 14 different ways, each one adding up to a 0.25%, and you found 14 different ways that they do it? Now all of a sudden, some of those margins out there are a little sketchy, aren't they? I don't know, when a ranked choice voting passes in the city of Bloomington by less than 100 votes, and a population of 80,000.
So,
Kind of
so do you
significant.
guys, so do you know it?
Wow.
You guys know that in Bloomington, they moved we have a homeless problem, right? We also have voters moving from other state problem when they don't have any housing. So let's just say we get some hotels in Bloomington that don't have anybody staying in them because we have a COVID problem. So let's put people in hotels in Bloomington, and then they get to register to vote in Bloomington, and they get to vote in our Bloomington election, right? Well, just think if we have 100 of those people, boom, ranked choice voting in Bloomington.
Or how about a homeless shelter where you're only allowed to stay there for a week and they move you from location to location?
Talk to the people in Red Wing, find out how that worked out for them this year about what's happening in Red Wing with moving people to Red Wing. You know, in Goodhue County, they're about to build a lot of low-income housing and move voters.
So in Rochester.
Yeah, we're moving voters. Basically, we're gonna move people. Do you need the housing because you don't have enough housing in Rochester? Or are we building housing, build it and we move people? We build the housing and then move people? Or do we not have enough housing? Right? And by the way, we just learned from COVID that we don't want to have people live in close quarters because they spread COVID. Why are we going to be building multifamily housing after we just survived a pandemic?
Light rail's coming.
It's for all the immigrants, illegals coming across the border.
But I mean, what we want is for people to live in open air, right? We want, and nobody's going to ride the light rail because they're all. If we have COVID, we're going to all get COVID from the light rail, right? Come on, people.
We
This
talked
is
about
an
like,
issue.
remember we talked about filing cases and stuff like that? So data matters, right? So being a nerd, so originally December 15th was the deadline. Unless, because of COVID, your county wrote a letter saying that something disastrous happened. The statute kind of is really kind of weird about this, where it literally has to be fundamentally unrecoverable, is the best way to
Actually,
describe
the
it.
statute says that you cannot complete, that you can't, like there has to be a fire. If you read it, the
whole
plain
thing burned
language,
down. The tornado.
it has to be that you can't actually complete the task. If there was a fire, a flood, and I'm not talking about the kind of flood that happened in Georgia because we all know that didn't actually happen in Georgia. There was no flood in Georgia. We're
Breaking
alive.
news. It's an unscrolling.
Lies.
Broken
Oh.
So some of them got an extension to January 12th. What happened on January 6th?
Keys.
Electoral college is certified.
What? The electoral. Well, yeah, that was accurate. The electoral college is basically validated, right? So if we're not done entering the data allegedly until after January 12th, so if I was like a data person trying to go, there's something wrong here, they'd be looking at me like, you don't have all the data, you can't prove anything. Right? Isn't that great? So you're right, it seems like somebody really big up there understands how to play this whole game. Now you're kind of getting where we're going to go at the end of this whole thing. So yeah, so in reality, the real argument is when you look at the election laws in Minnesota, they are broken in so many ways that attorneys can't file an authentic, legitimate lawsuit because, number one, they can't actually sue the people, or actually present a case to the people who are actually responsible for it. Because when you try to basically list the Secretary of State, who's actually ultimately responsible for enforcing the law, and the statute says you have to file against the candidates, who we agree did nothing wrong. They're not the ones that committed the issues.
Right.
They're actually on our site. On our site over
Well, we
here.
don't know if they're on our side or not, but
True.
they're not the one who did it.
Right.
I mean, there's a different provision in the law that talks about campaign finance, fraud. Believe me, there's plenty of that going on. That's not what we're talking about, right?
So
We all know there's
it's
that.
kind of like you having a car accident and you have to, instead of sue the person that you had an accident with, you're supposed to sue your neighbor who was at home watching TV.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Our system is super broken, and you have to, just as a quick side, because it's important to say it, in this process, once you have a certification of the election, which happens the Tuesday before Thanksgiving generally, right? Like, that's when it happens. You have 7 days, Thanksgiving weekend, to do this process. So in case you haven't heard, I am the fraud lawyer. I have been attacked as being the fraud lawyer, and so I'll say this very quickly. What we did is there was a Minnesota election integrity team. Jose Jimenez, his wife Sandra, Allie, there was about, I don't know, well over 100 volunteers went all over the state of Minnesota, gathered data, and I wasn't connected at that point. Yeah, I am not connected, and so I got involved kind of after they'd done all the data collection for the most part, and they asked me to file suits. I was one of the volunteers, myself and another lawyer named Jane Bowles. And so the election integrity team was communicating with all the people, which is not uncommon that happens with lawyers filing suits and things. There's, you know, at firms and things, whatever. So they were communicating with people, and all of the people that were involved in our lawsuits filled out affidavits saying that they understood they were joining an election contest. They all sent in affidavits saying, I am doing this. And so I was given affidavits by the election integrity team saying, these are people who literally, it says in the affidavit, we have it. I understand, I am joining in an election contest, right? So then I filed these lawsuits, right? And they were never heard because the judges said, you can't sue Steve Simon because he's not a candidate, even though he's the one that oversees all the fraud. And then the service is crazy. You have to serve the candidates personally. You can't serve them at their campaign offices. And we sued the 4 congressional candidates, Ilhan Omar, Betty, and Dean Phillips, and Ilhan, Dean, who is it? Or Angie Craig. Yeah. So, and Betty, yeah. So the 4 of them. And again, they had nothing to do with the election fraud. They are not there cheating. That's not how it works. But it's like a game. Like, it's just the laws of it. And anyway, so the judges didn't hear it. They, you're supposed to serve them. You can't find them. They don't have to list their addresses anywhere. And you're supposed to serve in the county in which they live, but you don't know where they live because they don't even have to live in the district that they represent. That's not, constitutionally, they can live anywhere in the state.
And by state statute, a lot of them are actually in Washington, D.C. more than they are in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And Minnesota has a crazy law that if you're outside of the state for 6 months and 1 day, you're not actually technically a resident of Minnesota.
And you have to serve them at where they abide. And, you know, it's a crazy thing. So basically, all the election cases get thrown out because of service. And our point is, service should be at the Secretary of State, and then he should. But you know, that's not the way our law is. So they throw the cases out all the time, and that's how it goes. And so 2 months later, one of the plaintiffs came forward and said, well, I didn't know, she sent a letter to the, well, she talked to me, and then we had a conversation, whatever, I thought it was over with, and then she sent a letter to the judge saying, well, I didn't even know that I was on the suit. I didn't understand what an election contest was. I didn't understand. And so, anyways, so the judge, you know, I can't say too much about it, but the judge agreed that this is terrible, that this woman didn't understand that an election contest was being filed. She didn't know what it was, and so he said that I should be fined $10,000 because I committed a fraud on the courts because this poor woman didn't know what it was.
But she signed an affidavit.
She did. She did. The judge didn't look at that, and I couldn't
The
question.
newspaper actually reports that too.
And I actually did get to ask her a couple of questions. She agreed with everything in her affidavit, but that wasn't the point. And she said she didn't know. I mean, she didn't understand. And he said I should have made sure she really understood what an election contest was. And she said she didn't understand. So bottom line is, you know, we will be appealing this, of course, right?
It's not free.
Yeah. So this, you know, because I think that this is ridiculous, and I think this is political, and I think that the goal is by this person, right? And so this one case, which happens to be Ilhan Omar, that one case, those 3 plaintiffs on Ilhan Omar's case, all said that they didn't understand and they didn't know that I was the attorney on the case because the Minnesota Election Integrity Team was the one that communicated with them, and they didn't know I was the case. They knew there were volunteers, that was in the email, they just didn't know it was me. And so they should have known it was me, specifically. So bottom line is, look, you know, if they want to spank me, because, you know, but whatever. Bottom line is, I'll appeal it. Now I am the official plaintiff of the case. So that's fine. I live in the district, and maybe I get to appeal the case now, I hope. I think maybe I should get to appeal it. So I'm the plaintiff now, there's gonna be an appeal process, or whatever. But I think the reality is what we have found.
This is where the real fraud of the court is.
That's exactly,
Yeah, I mean,
This is the fraud on us.
we're not going away. I mean, what we found actually is real, and I think that there are many people who do not want, by the way, Republicans, there's this thing that I call the elected class, right? The elected class does not want us to talk about all of this, right? And so I think that what Rick and I are talking about is,
That's what we found in the swamp.
that's Rick's, by the way, I didn't come up with that, that's all Rick.
I take full credit for
All
that.
Rick, it's nothing to do with me.
My timing is terrible.
So I think it's important for me as a lawyer to say that I think that the elected class of people, Republicans and Democrats, there's a group of people that like their power. It's tied to money and financial interests, and the media is connected to it. And we have too many politicians who are no longer connected to the people they represent, plainly and simply. And I think they all should be voted out, Republicans and Democrats who don't represent the people. I think that they all should go. All of them. I'm a populist at heart. I believe in the Constitution. Those people in Washington should stick to the Constitution. We in Minnesota should build the state the way we want it to be built and structured. And I think that we are in a very bad place, and we will overturn. We are finding this fraud. We are going to talk about it, and we are going to fight about it. We are going to fight with these people, and they don't like it. I've only been followed a couple of times, so far, and I'm sure it'll be more. But we're going to keep doing it. Go ahead.
So the ballots are thrown away after what, 18 months?
22.
22.
22? Is there
Allegedly.
anything being passed in St. Paul to keep those from being thrown away?
No, but we have time. We have plenty of time. Yeah, it's there.
Are the outer envelopes also kept the 22 months?
You're making the assumption they even have them now.
What?
That they ever have.
They're supposed to by state statute. By state statute, they are supposed to keep all of those,
Yes.
including any notes that they use to kind of count.
Right.
So,
All of the election materials.
All
you
of
got
it.
it. Yep, perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
how can we help?
We'll get more to that later.
Okay.
Because every little bit helps, whether it's financial, being an investigator, standing up, taking a picture of this previous slide right here and putting it on your social media right now. Education is so important.
So the 5 days and 25 days correlate to the 29th date on the left-hand column, right?
Yep.
And you haven't talked about that was the data dump where 39% was missing, right?
Yep.
And the number that corresponds to that is what, 700,000?
Absentee ballots. Yep.
700,000.
1.2 overall, 1.2 million overall ballots. But the one that I can hang my hat on, because must immediately, is absentee ballots.
Will you back up and repeat that, please? You don't have absentee ballots on the right-hand side up there.
Right. And so, well, this overall, the 38.9%, that represents 1.2 million regular ballots. All of them
1.2
together.
million ballots.
Yep. All of them
Okay.
in total. And so when we talk about, well, what can you hang your hat on from a fraud perspective? Yeah, well, what's funny is that same kind of percentage also represents the absentee ballots. They're kind of equal
And of that 1.2 million, 700,000 are absentee ballots.
You got it. Good job. Yep, awesome.
So, and here's the thing, for me, I guess, what the point of the lawsuits that we filed, the election contest that we filed, which in Minnesota are considered civil lawsuits, even though they're an election contest,
Yep.
is that what we were talking about is the tremendous need to build trust between the people, right? We need to trust that our system is working, right? And how we do that is by having an open, honest process. And when what we saw happen in the post-election reviews was just like what happened in other states. In Hennepin County, they had one camera that people could watch with no sound. Have you ever watched poker on TV? Where they had the cameras up above and you can see every table, right? How can the poker channel run a table with a camera and our government can't figure out how to make sure that we the people can see a recount, right? This is disgraceful.
Yeah,
I think we should give a contract to the poker channel to run the recounts all over the country. I'm not kidding. Because apparently they know how to run a camera, and Hennepin County does not. Okay?
They could do it at the Indian casinos.
Yes, I bet you they could handle, because you know they're sitting up in the room watching everything.
They don't have to wear masks either.
Yeah, you got it. So by the way, it's exactly correct.
It's a woke virus.
Yes, isn't it incredible? So we have to start to say, when they're pushing back on us and saying there's no fraud, we absolutely know that there was fraud, because we know in Dakota County, they verified an election when they were missing 800 ballots,
And didn't follow the law.
and they didn't follow the law. So if they want us to trust them, then they should have recounted they should have recounted the other precincts. But they didn't. And so here's the problem that you learn when you're a little kid, right? That if people don't, people who cheat, it's like, do you ever play Monopoly with the free parking? Right? You know, and some people play free parking, some people don't play free parking. But nobody can play Monopoly where one person playing gets the money in free parking and the other person doesn't get the money, right? The bottom line is we've got to play by the same rules. And what we were asking for is an audit. What we said in our lawsuits is we want an audit. Right? We want to, you don't have to count all the ballots. You know what we want? Let's count the outer envelopes. Let's just count the outer envelopes. Because every precinct in the law still says segregate by precinct. All the materials should be segregated. So let's just go precinct by precinct. There's 4,000 of them. Send the election judges out and let's count the outer envelopes. Because they should be, and certificates for the people who voted absentee early, where they had the certificates instead of outer envelopes, because they voted in person absentee. Let's count them. And that should tell us how many people actually voted absentee. And it should match up exactly, right? And if they don't have the absentee ballot envelopes, outer envelopes, then that'll tell us something, right? Let's count them. Let's count them. We should have counted them right away, and it would have been over and done with. And then we would trust. But they don't want to do that. Why not?
When you talked about the ballot boards, you talked about they can open the envelopes. You didn't spend a lot of time on ballot boards. I have a story, I served on my ballot board. I have a story to
Thank
tell
you.
when you want to take
I
the
love
time.
it. I want it.
And we'll get there.
But let him say, is there anything,
Well, our county board, Winona County, had appointed eight election judges at its January meeting, and they were all county staff people. Okay, so we got down close to the election, county day, October 20th, whatever, and the county auditor wanted bipartisan volunteers to work as election judges on the ballot board.
Mm-hmm.
She looked at this list that came down from the Secretary of State's office, and there were only 4 people from Winona County on the list. I was one of them. We don't know why there weren't more people that came down from the Secretary of State. So we wanted more Republican election judges to serve, but she wouldn't look beyond those 4 people, even though our county BPOU chair would vouch for people as being Republicans that would serve. She refused to entertain that. So, first day of counting, I'm across the table from my bipartisan counterpart, I know him. And they brought in the trays of envelopes from the precincts. We verified the count. I'll back up in a bit. I'll tell it now. The secrecy envelopes had all been opened prior to that, which was a violation as far as I'm concerned.
Correct.
Okay, because we don't, so anyhow, we were able to pull the ballots out of this open secrecy envelopes that had been stored who knows where, or manipulated by
you're
who
still in the
nobody
outer
knows.
envelope too?
Huh?
The outer envelope is still there?
No outer envelopes at all. We verified that the precinct was right, we verified the count, we initialed them off, we were surrounded by these appointed staff members. After we got done stacking them, behind our backs, they fed them into the machines. You know, we didn't observe that. And when at the end of the day, we had more stacked than they had counted, so those disappeared overnight somewhere.
Oh, yep, right. Do you guys understand this? This is what's happening, okay?
That's my story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I'm hoping you're willing to file an affidavit for us.
I have told Andy, Andy and I know each other, he's heard my story.
Okay.
I don't know if I've given him an affidavit or
Yeah,
not, but I'll do it for
we
you.
need it signed, because when they ask where's the evidence,
See, that's evidence, right there, that's evidence.
And anybody here should be willing to sign up to be an election judge.
Yeah.
And it's best to do it through the party, because the party sends that to Secretary of State, who compiles the list and sends it down to the county election officials. And you should also, when you fill out that application, be willing to work, there's a checkbox for willing to work outside of your precinct, so that you can work in the metro area if you need, or anywhere in the state. And you should also try to get on the ballot board. Every county by statute has to have a ballot board. And currently, they're mostly staffed by county people, which is not bipartisan.
Just make sure you know, and put pressure on the GOP, GOP, because I think they had over 9,000 names. There were only 3,600 names turned in. And so that's a problem, right? That we need to pressure the party to turn in those lists. I went to a hearing in April last year, and the one thing that, I was the only Republican that testified at a hearing in April last year. All the Democrat groups trying to get Steve Simon permission to do the consent decree issue that he ended up doing, even though the legislature denied him the right. The thing that I did ask for in that hearing that I said needed to be done is they needed to extend the deadline, which is May 1st, to get election judges. And because of COVID, I said that I believe they needed to move that deadline, right, into July or August. And they did not move that deadline, right? So that gave the ability for them to not accept names, basically, right? So we need that deadline should be later, right? And they didn't change that. So even now they didn't change it.
So would you please voice exactly what should we ask GP to do?
Aggressively seek the names of people willing to be election judges across the state. Aggressively. I mean, we'd rather give them 50,000 names. Wouldn't that be great if we just literally gave them 50,000 names?
1.2 million.
Yeah, 1.2 million. 1.2 million.
So the election judges are different than the poll watchers.
Yeah, poll
yes,
watchers
yes.
can't really do anything.
And Trump team stressed poll watchers instead of election judges, which I never understood.
I think the Trump team thought that we had a lot of election judges too, and I think we don't really know why those names weren't passed on.
Right.
I know personally so many people who volunteered to be election judges and were not called to be. Their names weren't on the list. So I think this is a real question, right? How did that happen and why were they not?
Were they not passed on, or were they just lost?
Correct. Well, no, they weren't. And we know that the list there were only I think 3,600 election judge names given. So we don't know why that is. We don't know where at the party that was lost. We don't know who's in charge of that. I don't know who's in charge of that. So I'm not going to place blame on who did it because I don't know.
There's 40,000 needed across the state, reportedly bipartisan. Reportedly, the Democrats have 20,000 signed up. We have, a few thousand?
Yeah, and we should remember, this is the thing that I try to just remind people about. Rick and I talk about this all the time. I can't tell you how many people at the GOP don't get this. The requirement for party balance it relates to all four major parties. Okay, there's four major parties. There are two pot parties. Two pot parties.
Marijuana parties.
Both of them, yes.
Two marijuana parties. Two marijuana parties, and there is a Republican Party, and there is a Democrat Party. So basically, when they talk about party balance, right, that doesn't mean Democrat and Republican necessarily. And so it's important to understand that it is hypothetically possible if the marijuana parties submit names, you could have potentially no Republican election judges. None.
There'd be plenty of Cheetos.
It's 3 against 1.
Yeah, I mean, the law doesn't say that you have to have proportional representation. That was a change I recommended to some legislators, right? Like maybe we should have proportional representation unless the parties do not submit names, right? But that's not, nobody's changed the law, right? So the law is written as though there's two parties, but there's four, but proportional representation would be a better goal, right? When there's four parties.
I have an asterisk stat for you because remember we talked about we're rabbit hole diggers? So would it surprise you that there were the pot parties that actually ran congressional?
Marijuana parties.
Oh yeah. marijuana parties that ran congressional candidates for the U.S. House, and not a single one of them filed an FEC report. Let me make that clear. You know the Federal Elections Commission report that all federal candidates must file to basically say they were a legitimate candidate and received X amount of dollars and spent X amount of dollars, and they didn't file any reports.
Neither of them.
None of them.
None of them.
Not one, none of them.
Yet they made major party status somehow.
Right.
Correct.
Even the guy who died, I can accept him not getting one in, but it was interesting that his website transferred to a Senate candidate, so it was fantastic.
It is good. Their
I'll let that one
websites,
pass.
if you go look at their websites, they're not 100%, but pretty closely cookie cutter. You know, they are coordinated. I'm not gonna say conspire, they're not conspire, but they're very coordinated, they're very organized. Whoever's organizing them, they're very organized. Which, you know, they are herding cats over there, because they know what they're doing.
And there's one candidate, if you look at their Facebook post, it's kind of obvious that they did spend over $7,500 because of mailers, events, signs, t-shirts. The numbers kind of seem really close, so.
Did Jennifer Carnahan have anything to do with that?
No, she did not. Let me have you ask the question again, because obviously she didn't help those parties.
Did she have anything to do with the number of Republican names that were put in for election judges?
I'm gonna
Or
say,
for ballot board.
I'm gonna say as the chair of the party, she is ultimately responsible, if that's what your question, if that's the answer you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. The ballot boards are something that's very confusing to people because the law is very bad. It's a terrible law, and we should be trying to change the ballot board law because the law is permissive, meaning that it doesn't say that they have to use election judges, and if they have exhausted available judges from the list provided, for example, then they can hire. It says they may hire, right? So because they don't have to exhaust the list and then hire, technically, all this arguing that we're doing about they need to hire election judges and they shouldn't be hiring, it's kind of a false argument. It's a big distraction. And we wasted, I think, a lot of time and energy on these ballot board cases. It doesn't make sense to me why we even wasted our time on that. Because the law is badly written. And so the judges can make a ruling saying that they can, in fact, I think, hire people.
Are you working on improving those laws?
Well, I tried, but see, we have a problem. See, we don't, I think, unfortunately, we did win, I think, a majority. I think, actually, we did win in the House and the Senate, but because nobody would challenge any elections, and the party didn't push to challenge it, we had nobody challenging the elections, and so I think we should have won.
Right.
I think even that poor man that died of COVID, I think he won his election. I think we won, but because nobody challenged anything, we still don't have the House and...
Is it too late?
No, it's
Well,
never
we're
too
gonna
late.
find out, aren't we?
So, no, it's never too late, and we're still challenging some of the pieces, and I'll give you a future vision of what has transpired. The League of Minnesota Cities attorney has basically submitted a position to the legislature that ballot boards and you know, they're too difficult to find enough representation across the parties that there's not enough interest out there. So we recommend that you guys change the law to not require the party balance or any of these other pieces. So they're already well organized. So this is why we're here trying to tell you, no, it's never too late. So here's some examples that I need to give you guys. I didn't want to tell the story today, but I think I have to because it will open your eyes immediately. So it's a little bit of a, how many of you went to college or have had college kids in your lives? Okay, so college, did you go to college? Yep, okay. So I'm gonna create a real bad stereotype here, but it will fit perfectly and it'll open your eyes immediately. All right, here's the situation. Remember back in the old college days you have, and I'm just gonna flat out say it's a Democrat girl, nerdy girl, she's got her glasses on, she's got a game on. She registers for that political science class 1 month early. What did she go do? She bought books right away. She studied all those pages. She talked to all of her sorority girlfriends, And guess what? A couple of them already had the class. What'd she do? She asked them, hey, you still got copies of the syllabus and some of the assignments? What'd you guys do for a small group, right? No, this is serious. 8 a.m., first day of class is gonna begin. Frat boy Republican wakes up from his his frat house, stumbles down, goes to the registrar's office, registers for class. He got the last seat. Sweet, he needed that because that was one of the departments that he was going to need for graduation. He's not really interested in political science. God, no. No way. But here he goes. He gets into the class. He sits down. It started at 10 o'clock. Okay, it seems like it's going to be pretty easy. The professor's really verbose, kind of writes stuff up there. Kind of get it, you know, politics, Democrats, blah, blah, you know, I've listened to my parents. I read the news. I understand higher taxes, lower taxes, more needs over here, less over here. Okay, I get the lay of the land. Thursday rolls around. He decides to go get the book. Oh, it's homecoming week. Friday, Saturday, he has a great time. She's already kind of prepping for a small group, kind of figuring out what she wants to do and kind of get going. Monday comes in, small group assignment. Okay, everybody get together. She's already got a tactical plan. She tells that group that she's taking charge because she talked to her sorority sisters, and this is what the professor's looking for. They got an A last time, and I guarantee we're going to get an A this time, right? You know this is how they're going to operate. Frat boy, he goes over to the small group. I don't want to get in your way. You guys go ahead and do that. I've got hazing to do over here. So, because he doesn't want to lower the grade, you know, and get in their way. And the rest of the small group is, yeah, we don't want you to have your help. So he goes on in his merry way. They have a great weekend, you know, everything goes in, midterm comes across. Okay, boom. They take it, they get their test back. What do you think frat boy got? Nah, he actually did okay, because he paid attention. He went there every day, he listened, he got a C. What did the Democrat girl do? Absolutely, she got an A. You know, she's just so tactical, she is on it. She's invested, keyword. All right, then, small group assignment comes in, boom. What did the Democrat girl team get? A. Hey, of course she got an A. We didn't expect any less. What did the frat boy get? No, he got a B. Why? Because he didn't get in their way. Right? So he's got that hard C, that hard B. He's looking at that going, I think I got this. I'm going to coast through this. You know, there's no reason to really read through the rest of it, right? So, but he keeps going to class to at least be somewhat diligent. Then here comes the final. We already know what the Democrat girl got. She got an A, you're right. But guess what else she did? She did the extra credit. She got the hard A, right? So she ensured it. Even if she missed a question, she did the extra credit on that. Frat boy, he goes in, looks at the exam, and he's like, okay, I studied the night before, but I didn't expect chapter 9 because that wasn't on the syllabus. Why would I have to study chapter 9? And then he reads over to the side of the book. Oh, really? Professor wrote the book. Right? So there you are sitting there looking at it, and he gets a D on the final, right? But he still passes, he still gets the credit. That is literally how I see the parties act in Minnesota. The Democrats are on it every single day in the legislature. Every time that I see testimony in the Senate, every time that there's expert witnesses or groups that are coming to testify, it's literally 5 to 10 to 1 Republican. There are times that I've seen her go testify, no other Republicans have even shown up. Whereas anytime that's voter integrity, what do we got? We have the ACLU, we have the homeless shelter, we have the Women's Batter Club, we have the Young Voters Club, we have XYZ and everybody else. And then here comes the Republican testimony, it's just an activist kind of like, hi. And so the Democrats are really invested in their religion, their profession. They have figured out a way that every 2 weeks they get funded through people's paychecks into their various organizations. Not to name any way that it's not unions. But they literally do that. And what do we do as Republicans? We might donate here and there, you know, when it's necessary or when it's something that interests us. We're not as focused on them. And the other thing is, like, we may sit here and look at the Democrats and just kind of go, wow, you know, it's really pity. You know, look at how well organized they are. Let me tell you about the MNGOP. Do you realize that the MNGOP, as a professional organization, is one of the worst organized organizations out there? And I will tell you that as serving on the MNGOP State Executive Committee for 8 years, because I was co-chair of the 3rd Congressional District of Minnesota. And I will tell you right now, did you realize that most of the BPOUs and activists are using a Gmail account? Do you remember 10 years ago, the congressional testimony that said all of the Gmail accounts were hacked? Do you think we're idiots for not even controlling our own emails at a base level? Why doesn't the Republican Party, I challenge you, to basically sign up for a Microsoft Office 365 account, pay for a master email account for every single congressional district, every single Senate district, every single BPOU, so that way when you have a transition of leadership within a BPOU, the IT guy up there can just change the password, hand it to the new person, and then say, voila, there's the complete history for your entire BPOU.
But I think the
We can't even do that.
I think, though, it's very important to understand, though.
Yeah.
Last June, I sent links to one of the lawyers for the Trump campaign, the RNLA, which is Republican National Lawyers Association. I went through Craigslist, okay?
Right.
I went through Craigslist in all of the major cities across the United States and found the ads they were literally so blatant, but they said they were hiring people to defeat Trump. They were paying people $15 an hour, every major city. $15 an hour, it was medical, dental insurance, sick and vacation time, full-time hours through the election, okay? So I reported this and I said, these are nonprofits that are advertising on Craigslist. And nonprofits, right? Advertising defeat Trump, okay? So I mean, I sent links, and again, this is just me, I don't know, maybe they were getting emails from people all over the country saying, hello, Trump attorneys, do something, right? But I'm gonna also tell you just a quick story, and I'm not saying these are bad guys, it's just they have bad names. That when Donald Trump was in Minnesota and we were fighting those consent decree cases, you heard about the consent decree cases, everybody, you all know what I'm talking about, the consent decrees where they got to change all the election law in Minnesota? And there were consent decree cases here, and they're all over the country, consent decree. These were the things that gave Steve Simon basically the Democrats sued the Democrats.
Wait, what was that? Say that again.
The Democrats sued the Democrats.
Okay. Is that like the Democrat girl?
So basically, yeah, the Democrats, all the activist groups sued Steve Simon. And so remember in April I said I was at the hearing and I said that Steve Simon asked for permission to change the law that would allow him to, if there was an emergency order related to a pandemic, that he would be able to alter election law, and even if the pandemic was resolved, his orders to change election law would be irrevocable.
Before pandemic.
Yeah, right. So this was in April, the first week of April. So Steve Simon said to the legislature, I want you to give me permission, this was the very beginning of April, it was April 8th. He said, I want permission to basically change any of the election law I need to, okay? And even if the pandemic or the health emergency is resolved, my orders will be irrevocable, okay? So the legislature said no to him, okay? So then in May, the Democrat groups that were at that hearing sued Steve Simon to say that we need to do all those things that he asked for. They sued him to do all the things that he was told no. So then he entered into a consent decree with them so that they could get all the things. So and this is not, so lawsuits are supposed to be adverse, right? They're supposed to be adverse, but they were actually asking him to do the things that he asked to do, right? See how that works? So we're suing you to do the things that you want to do anyways, but the legislature won't let you do. See how that works? Right? So he entered into an agreement to do all the things he really wanted to do.
Now that's some extra credit.
So that is something. Okay? So that's actually what happened. Okay? Yeah, oh, for sure, 100%.
Members of professional organizations.
Yeah, and by the way, what they did was they made sure that the first consent decree was only for the primary, because it was only for the primary that sort of took the wind out of the ability to fight with them, and the Republicans weren't really Johnny on the spot, so they didn't intervene until after the consent decree already had been entered into, so it was too late for the first consent decree, which was for the primary. Then in July, it turned into, now we're gonna actually try and extend it to the general election. And then there was another consent decree so this is how they threw out all of that election law, right? But listen to this. So you know sometimes, maybe you guys have all heard the little joke about like people say, God, why didn't you save me or whatever? And it'll be like, what do you mean? You know, I sent the this and I sent the rowboat and I honked the horn and I did that, right? So it's just a coincidence, but there were two attorneys that represented the GOP and that represented Trump in the lawsuit. And I'm not saying these are bad attorneys in any way. I'm not saying that. But sometimes there is a sign, okay, that you should think to yourself, maybe, right? So the last names of the attorneys? Ellison and Gore.
No way.
Swear to you.
Make it up.
And so the lawyers for Trump and the GOP entered into a consent decree that said not only, this is when they were at the Court of Appeals in August. So remember I told you that we had this issue where our legislature said no to what Simon asked for. They said no. Rhode Island was decided. Okay, there was a Rhode Island case that was decided about consent decrees. But that was a little bit different than our case, because in Rhode Island there hadn't been any state actors who said to the Secretary of State, no. So our facts were different, actually. We had a different argument to make, because he literally, it'd be like if your kids, how many of you have kids? This is like your kids saying to you, can I take the car? And you say no, and they take the car. Versus your kid not asking for the car, taking the car, and then asking for forgiveness, right? It's the asking for forgiveness versus permission. So in our state, he asked for permission, didn't get it, and then took the car, right? That was different. The facts matter. So our case was different than Rhode Island. But even so, what happened is, as soon as that Rhode Island case happened, the attorneys entered into an agreement to withdraw from the appeal and to not challenge the consent decrees in any other judicial forum, which meant that Trump couldn't challenge the consent decrees in federal court, right? Which is why, so he pulled out of Minnesota. Because once you couldn't challenge the consent decrees, that meant all the absentee ballot shenanigans couldn't be challenged. Because the Ellison Gore attorney team.
Can't make it up.
Yeah, and they're probably great attorneys. I don't even know. They're probably great.
I'm going to try to defend the party here a little bit. I agree that the Democrats, through their nonprofits and their unions, are all better organized at this than we are. But the Republican Party is more volunteer-driven.
That's right.
From the grassroots,
That's why
it
we
takes
gotta-
all of us to be party activists
Yes.
and to contribute time and talent to make it work. Time and treasure. As far as Jennifer Carnahan, your question, back in last March, she appointed 3 staff people to solicit election judges. And 3 staff people worked onto it to get the list of the Secretary of State. Since the election, she's been criticized in hindsight that she didn't do enough. Well, I believe she did. She did defer to Team Trump to a large degree. Maybe she shouldn't have. But she let Team Trump take the reins on this. And I think Team Trump just counted on having Minnesota. I worked with the attorney and staff person, Josh, that was working to solicit poll watchers, and I told him about machines in Minnesota being connected to the internet through Wi-Fi, and he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't even give me a second call.
Right.
I asked that poor guy, by the way, and that's why I said to you from the very beginning, this is why I said to you about this. I don't know who was responsible for it, so I can't say whose fault it was.
Right.
I think it's really important that we be honest about that. I don't know where that problem happened.
Right.
That guy that came here, I know there were people who offered to help, and I don't know how the Trump team got that guy Josh here. But when I met with him, and he was a nice guy. I asked him if he had any idea how many precincts were in Minnesota, and I think he told me he had something like 50. And then I said, okay, you've been here for several weeks, and there's over 4,000. So, this is when you don't hire someone from Minnesota to run a Minnesota deal, right? It's a problem. Yeah, so you're right on the money.
In the last month or two, Trump team sent an attorney from Florida, and I told him the story about the machines being connected, and he wouldn't give me a second call.
Right.
You're right. You're 100% right.
Was Josh the top Minnesota guy for Trump?
Back to Simon feeding his friends and suing and so on and so forth. But anyhow, even so he lost, or whatever, or won, whatever, how we want to call it. How could the judge give him that authority over the legislature anyway? Shouldn't the judge and him both be in the slammer?
So she can't quite answer
I mean, I
that.
can't really talk about it.
I would,
But you understand my question?
we do, and it would be very interesting, so it would be very interesting to explore ethics complaints filed by any of you citizens to potentially question the efficacy of an attorney, Steve Simon, and a judge who potentially bypassed federal law, constitution requirements of saying that the legislature is supposed to decide the rules of the election, and we already have documented that the legislature said no. So in regular parliamentary procedure that we all operate under, we know that if something was already dead as a poison pill, you don't get to reintroduce it again in the same meeting or session. That should also flow in the judicial ethos. They should recognize that the legislature is the populist area, and if they say no, it's not supposed to be by the governor or antics or games or other areas. So it's...
So how, okay, that answers my question. So how do we do it?
You can simply file a form with the ethics board, write a simple summary, because we're plain language state, and just submit it. I would encourage lots of people to submit it. If you can find an attorney in your local area to kind of help guide you through kind of the thought process of it, that would be really good. And I think it would be important that there is creativity and different thought throughout the state from activists, so that it doesn't look like it's a unified front. Because we all think a little bit differently, and I think that's important.
I wanted to say something outside of this. Has nothing to do with elections in general. This is not about elections, what I'm going to say right now. Rick knows that we joke about this a lot. I went to law school not to be a lawyer, and I mean that in all honesty. I've never charged a single person a single penny for any legal help, ever. Because I do not believe that justice should have a cost. I don't believe people should have to spend money to get justice. It is disgusting that average people cannot get justice when they are wrong, because lawyers have created a system where they can literally charge you whatever they want, right? And you have no way to stop it, because this lawyer and that lawyer, it's not even that they collude, it's just that they actually benefit from creating a system that you have to use them, and you have to go to court, and they can have hearings, and it just ratcheting up of these expenses. So whether it be family law, it doesn't matter what kind of law it is, people spend tens of thousands of dollars on things that, 25 years ago, people just worked it out. Because lawyers have created a horrible system. And as an officer of the court, I would be told not to say that, but I just think it's true, okay? So I'm this person who thinks that the legal system is really horribly broken, and it's been broken by lawyers, and I've literally never charged anybody money. And I think it's terrible, and I think we need to fix it. And I think, unfortunately, people think that in order to fix it, they have to sue for malpractice or do whatever. I think the way to fix it is to file complaints. To actually file complaints with the lawyers board about lawyers that they tell you, oh, this is no problem, do this, do that, oh, this will be no big deal. And then it suddenly, how does something that's no big deal suddenly cost you $50,000? Right. How does that happen? How does a simple custody issue suddenly turn into a $35,000 problem? Right? How many of you know people that that's happened to? And they still don't see their kids, or they're paying more money than, what I'm saying to you is, lawyers should be held accountable for this system.
And then those self-interested attorneys all become judges.
Yeah, and people are afraid to run against judges because they're afraid that they're going to lose, and then they're going to have to go in front of those judges. So I think that what we need to do is have people decide to run against judges, and we need to support those people. We need to support people who are willing to take on judges, because it's the only way to build accountability into the system. We need to have competition. And it's very difficult, but don't be afraid to go online and figure out how to do this and encourage your friends. Let's start holding lawyers accountable for this.
Robingroom.com is a good place to check on judges and file complaints on judges.
Say it again. Would you please repeat again? How do you spell?
Robin,
Oh,
Robingroom.com.
Are you going to talk a little bit about the number of missing absentee ballots on a county by county basis?
Yes.
Or is that saved for another? Because they really pushed it due to COVID. They wanted everybody to stay home and stay safe and hashtag stay home and don't you dare go outside after 10 p.m. That COVID's going to be hiding in the bushes. It's going to...
Unless you go to Walmart.
Yeah, unless you go to Walmart. That
It's
sounds
the
right. Yeah,
smartest
it's a woke...
virus.
Yeah. It doesn't go to the casinos, but...
So,
yeah.
I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get
Yeah.
to I'm gonna skip over a couple other things here real quickly and get to some other important data elements, because people
Okay.
are kind of wondering, like, how bad is the fraud? What other numbers do you have? So now I'm gonna back up and give you a little smaller number to digest. So what's interesting is that we have the requested and the accepted absentee ballots, and what was interesting is on November 4th, they had a report on the Secretary of State's website that we had about 1.8 million received absentee and mail-in ballots. But then, January 16th, it bumps up to 1.9 million. So then we get an extra 63,000 ballots. Surprise! So, remember when I talked about must immediately enter in? God, we're so efficient. It's fantastic. So, it's just incredible. And then we talk about, like, how many absentee ballots did they reject? They weren't supposed to reject any. They actually did reject a few because they were just so bad. So, like, for example, witness signatures, they basically rejected only 2,500 for the entire state. Then, let's see here. So, absentee ballot closing, that's actually kind of an important statute. So, but don't worry about that. We'll just kind of ignore that. Remember when I talked about, like, Hennepin County? Well, on their website, they told us they were going to start counting 7 days before the election. In testimony, they admitted 46.
46 days.
Yeah, I didn't start.
In testimony, they did what?
In testimony, they admitted to starting counting the ballots 46 days before the election.
Where do
See
you
this right
find?
here?
Yeah, absentee ballot counting starts at 5 p.m., 7 days before the election day.
Where they find?
So,
No.
so this 7 days, before election day is the old law.
They
So,
got free donut.
so this is pre-COVID. So with COVID, it was changed to 14 days, but then in testimony, they said that they basically counted at the beginning.
The beginning of,
Like, as soon as they
Early
started
voting?
accepting them, as soon as they started accepting them,
Yep.
they started to count them. And so, but no matter what, so you have the law that says counting begins after polls close, right? That 2 election judges insert the ballots into the tabulator after polls close, right? Steve Simon says in his little rule book, right, that they can begin inserting ballots into a tabulator, not a ballot box, but a tabulator. So he changes the word from ballot box to sort, right, while they're opening to accept, not ballot box. Ballot box, a box doesn't count, right? A box doesn't count, okay? A tabulator counts, but he doesn't say count, he says count. Here they say count, right? So we go from ballot box to tabulator without saying count. Here they say count.
Yeah.
And then we have the Attorney General saying on election day at approximately 3:57, we don't have enough votes quite yet. Right? Go get your friend.
And don't worry, that wasn't a typo because they did it a second time on the
Yeah,
website.
yeah. They definitely.
They listed it.
Yeah, they definitely. So they're counting. They're counting, and somebody is actually paying attention to the count.
oh,
And then how do we know that that actually happened? Because there's a timing issue. So in Hennepin County, where they're processing hundreds of thousands of ballots,
Wow.
you know, almost 700,000 ballots there.
By the way, remember, Minneapolis has a separate ballot board. So Minneapolis has to count the ballots and then transmit the totals to Hennepin County, right? And then Hennepin County has to combine the Minneapolis totals. So in order for Hennepin County to be doing this, it means Minneapolis has to be counting ahead of time too, because if Minneapolis didn't count ahead of time, Hennepin County couldn't have its totals done.
Oh, and Bloomington is another statutory city that also gets to have it separate. So both Minneapolis and Bloomington are statutory cities where that means they can do whatever they want. They don't.
No, they
actually,
can't.
they're home rule cities. So statutory cities is the default, which means you have to follow state law. You have to follow whatever's default. But then when you're a home rule city, you get to kind of make some additional adjustments. You know, home rule city basically says, oh, all of those standard statutes that the legislature passes, yeah, no good. We're going to do our own laws over here.
So how do you know who's in those?
It's listed on the Minnesota law website. There's very few, so it's usually very large cities.
Is Rochester the one?
No, I do not believe so.
But
I can double check
the
that.
only cities that get to have their own ballot boards are those. So Hennepin County has all the other cities that they should be counting after the polls close.
Right.
There's a lot of cities besides Minneapolis.
Were those cities that were grandfathered before the state incorporated? I mean,
No.
became a state?
No, because a lot of those cities could actually change after the fact. So Bloomington is one of those recent ones that had switched over before the Mall of America.
Is that also a charter city?
No, it is not. Charter city is different. So, yeah. So it's basically just the two classifications, statutory or home rule classification. So like Duluth is one. It's usually your larger areas. All right. So, but 98% at 919. I mean, it's just phenomenal progress. But
Remember, they also are supposed to be segregated by precinct.
Yep. And so this was the original manual that Steve Simon had sent out in the very beginning, which counting of absentee ballots begin after the polls close on election day. But then later on, they actually talk about the judge's opinion, kind of like, yeah, what I just said up there, we have a lot more flexibility to you.
Where does the October 20th date come from?
That's kind of the first official date set by the statute calculation as to when the first absentee ballot can be accepted.
And counting can start.
Right. So it's the first day that absentee balloting begins.
So these are election day polls, ballots.
Correct.
Okay.
We're gonna pass the plate for gas money, even though they're not done yet. And it's interesting how, I think we've been here for 2 hours nearly,
Yeah.
and nobody's bored of this yet. Isn't it interesting our politicians don't think we're interested in this at all?
Yeah. You thought I wouldn't have any facts for you, didn't you?
This is just
And
for
so,
gas money. if you
remember when
feel
I
like
talked
it's
about
something.
the vouching? This is the actual statute area that you want to basically write your legislators to basically say, okay, so I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The Senate passed an omnibus bill. They put some really weak election reforms in. We know they're going to have to go back to the table because the Democrats over on the House side, there's a whole justice reform team that wants to manipulate the budget over there. And so there's going to be some kind of a conflict. I think we should be doubling down to say, oh yeah, okay, if you want any of those pieces, number one, we want this changed. So go ahead and take a picture of this so that you know where that is. And so this limitation does not apply to an employee of a residential facility described in this clause. So the description of those clauses are these places. So that would be shelters, nursing homes, all of this.
Go back to the
Okay, you bet. So I wanted to make it real easy for you because I don't like taking notes.
So do any of you have family members that either live or work in group homes? So when I was in college, I worked in group homes.
Oh, do you want me to go back one? Okay,
And
so I'll
it
go
was
quick.
my first experience watching people vote for people, and we had a lot of arguments about it. Because even then, there were clients who had the right to vote, but they didn't understand, and the staff voted for them. And there's now been this push to expand the voting rights of people who don't have an understanding of the voting. right? So if you cognitively are functioning at the level of a 4-year-old, 3 or 4-year-old, should you have the right to vote, right? But there was a very big push by advocates to require voting rights to be reinstated. So in group homes all across the state, they have reinstituted voting rights for people who are cognitively impaired. And there are people with cognitive issues who are able to vote. But there are many, I'm telling you, there are many, many people in the state of Minnesota who should not be able to vote because they don't understand. And people are getting to vote twice. And it is a manipulation of the system. And that is not, as a disability rights advocate, it is not being an advocate for people with disabilities to give voting rights to a person who cannot understand what's happening. That is abusing a person and using them to push a political agenda. It is disgusting and disgraceful for these advocates to pretend that that is for the people, that is for themselves. It is disgraceful. And we should be calling them out about it.
So the law doesn't allow for memory care people to automatically have their ballot tossed out?
Correct.
No, in fact, there's nothing you can do about it, and family members have been finding that even when they went to try and help a family member vote, it was already done. It was already done for them. The staff just did it. And it used to be that family members helped the person vote, right? And now they've just taken it over. And so you had many people saying, I think the person voted, I think I voted, I don't remember if I voted, or I think I voted for a Democrat. People were, they were upset, or they were afraid to say they wanted to vote for a Republican because the staff person told them they should vote for a Democrat. So it just shouldn't be that this should be happening.
And let me give you an argument. So my mother-in-law, she suffers from Alzheimer's. So this is my criticism of this entire process. I'm sorry. There is no other profession that has a dual responsibility such as this. Those nurses and staff members should be there for the care and support of my loved ones. There should never be a situation where they're tied into somebody who is struggling trying to fill out a ballot while there's a red alarm going on down the hallway. I don't ever want that to happen. The nurses should not be stressed out trying to provide dual responsibility of support. Let's get real, let's be responsible, and let's actually care for our loved ones. And there's enough volunteers that can help, and especially family members, that can help our loved ones vote. Mm-hmm. That's the argument.
And who do you trust more to know how the person would have voted? A family member or a stranger? I don't know if it's nurses voting, I don't know if it's administrators helping them, but the point is, who do you trust more to know how that person would have wanted to vote, would want to vote, right?
It should be a conflict of interest. There's no way the employee should be helping the.
Especially if it's a Minnesota State Department of Health and Human Services employee, or perhaps a social worker that's an employee of the government with their interest tied to the funding.
It should be like a professional violation. There's no way. Even if you're not, if you're like a high school kid working, or if you're an actual nurse, whatever the deal is, that absolutely should not be happening.
Right, and so we need this as a central argument to start out with, because this is an argument that all of us, compassionate Republicans who have loved ones in this situation, this is the first fight that we take. Do not give up on this. Do whatever you can to spread the word. You get it, you understand it, and don't allow these weasel legislators to tell you we can't do it. Oh yeah? I don't care when it gets done. You're going to get it done, because if it doesn't, we're not voting for you again.
And pressure the facilities. I think it's important to pressure the facilities.
Yep.
I live in a retirement center, and this was a big concern at the last election, because I know there's a memory unit, but what are my rights as a citizen to go over there to ask the nursing director about it?
You can ask what their policy was, and I think if you have relatives in the facilities,
No, we don't.
I think you can always ask what the policy is. Just say, what if myself or a family member had to move in here or transfer care here? what would be your policy? Ask them for their policy, and if you have a person in your family that ends up in a facility, ask them what the policy is. You know, it used to be that, you know, people had guardianship or conservatorship, these issues would be addressed, but now they're starting to try and maintain these rights even when people aren't able to actually exercise the right to vote. Because I think here's the thing, here's how we know that Republicans are winning. As I was saying earlier, if Democrats were winning, they wouldn't be having to change all these laws to make it easier for them to get these votes, right? That's how we know we're winning, right? Because they wouldn't be trying to vote for a person who's severely cognitively impaired if they didn't need those votes. They need those votes to win.
They wouldn't do a sleight of hand with dates.
They need to manufacture these votes. So we have to find ways to stop them from getting these votes, right? Because it's literally this death. We're losing because there are all these one and this and that and this. We have to stop them. We have to stop all these. We put band-aids on all of it, right?
So I can't be totally bad news. I do have to at least give you a ray hope. There was actually one county that exceeded expectations and they deserve an award. Chippewa County. They got everything done, everything entered in by November 16th. So when I ran my data, they were at 100%. I could actually look at that election and go, I trust those peeps.
And you know what I bet they did a lot of paper?
100%.
What's the seat of Chippewa?
Where's Chippewa?
What's the county seat?
Let's see here. It's going to be Grand Falls. Yep. Yep. So the only reason I know that is because I literally drive through it twice a week as I go back and forth on 212, going between the Twin Cities and Brooklyn, South Dakota. So then the failed by expectations. I do have an update on Fillmore. They got done on March 23rd. So, by the way, why is that kind of important? February 15th is a statutory deadline for the statewide purge. So they missed that too.
So it doesn't count.
Right.
So what about the missing Minnesotans? Weren't there a lot of people purged from the voter rolls?
Yeah, just wait. I'm not ready for that one yet, but I'm willing to do that. I'll let you. Anybody else want a picture of this one? The stellar.
Rick, if you send these slides, we can send them out to people, couldn't we? If we share the PowerPoint?
You say 72 counties finished by 12/15.
Yeah.
And there's 87 counties, so you're missing 15, and they're not on your list.
These are the worst ones.
Yeah, these are the worst ones. There's still some in there that I kind of like in between and stuff like that. But I just wanted to do that because I don't want to pick on all the little ones.
Dodge County finished in February.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who won?
Yeah, so I actually do know where the party can get the ballot boards. So I'm going to start kind of getting through a bunch of these here. Oh, so like this one here is just kind of a no-brainer for me as a data guy, because you, the public, deserve to have this kind of data more quickly. And
This is a huge, huge problem.
Right, so actually, I didn't tell you about this story. So remember when I told you I had 5 databases? I didn't tell you the background of that. Because remember when I said I don't live here? So I asked some friends at different positions to document my request. So I asked Minnesota Voter Alliance to please ask for the data again, and I would, of course, work on it free for them. They were diligent and asked every single week after the election. I asked a state senator to ask every week. He documented with his staff what that response would be. He was denied several times, many a times. I even asked a House member, you need to do this. Make sure you document exactly what happens. They asked, he never fulfilled his request.
Don't whisper. What?
They never fulfilled his request ever. But the senator, they finally requested his late December. And then we asked some additional mutual friends. We got some more data that kind of trickled in, and it was interesting. And then I'm not ready for this one yet, but there's kind of a funny one that we asked about, because we kind of discovered the other database, the pre-election absentee database. They literally lied to us and said that they don't have the data, that it wasn't available, even though voters could still today go onto the Secretary of State's website to see their ballot status and see that it's still there. Liar, liar, pants on fire. And then we were able to work with the MNGOP and the RNC to actually get some of that data. So that completed, so all of those histories from October 27th through November 5th, so that we could have a view as to how many accepted ballots were actually in, so we could know whether or not they, must immediately enter in, actually happened.
The stuff about the data is, it's very interesting. He mentioned the purge that happens. There's an automatic purge that goes on, and so I've been tracking the data for years. And it is really interesting to see. So there's a law that says if you don't vote in 4 years, so basically if you haven't voted in a presidential election, you'll end up getting purged, okay, every 4 years, right? So what's interesting is you can watch these trends that happen where there'll be these huge purges that happen, maybe like 300,000 voters will get purged after an election, right? Between after an election in the February, before the next election cycle, there'll be 300,000. But then on election day, suddenly, like the next election cycle, like 350,000 people will be added in. And it's sort of this odd thing where you would think mathematically, who you're purging would be, it has to be people who either move,
I got a first note on
die.
that. My wife's son and I moved to South Dakota on the same day, filled out the new South Dakota voter registration information, which South Dakota automatically sends a letter for all three of us from Minnesota to say, hey, we got them, you can cancel them out. They removed my wife and I, but my son was active through a lot of this whole process. So that's why I was kind of watching.
Yeah. So if you think about who should be purged, the law is you purge people who move, you purge people who die, and you purge people who don't vote for 4 years. That's who you purge. So these are non-voters, right? Then, so if all of a sudden you're adding people in, so you get these big purges, but then always we're adding people in that is more than what was purged, right? So you should see then that our population, you would think, is going up, right? I mean, it's sort of an odd thing that's happening, right? You should be having this never-ending, increasing, massive amount of voters. It's kind of crazy. The numbers don't really make any sense at all. But you will see these huge purges after presidential elections. Huge. And so I posited to Rick, I think they're moving voters in before the elections, and then they leave after the elections. They're moving blue district people, and I think into probably from blue states, maybe from Wisconsin, maybe Milwaukee, maybe from Illinois. And then after the election, remember those ads for employees, remember, come work for defeating Donald Trump through the election. They move people. And so one of the things I want to say to you to think about, and I learned this in the Norm Coleman recount, because when I was going around lawyering and having to go from city to city as a part of that recount, I was stunned because out in Plymouth, for example, I was just amazed at some of the problems. And one of the lawyers said to me, just remember, you think that this is a conservative city, but who's in charge of the elections? The city clerk, right? And the city manager, right? And the person looked at me and said, do you think they're Republican or Democrat? Right? Who works in government? Democrat. Right? And so the person said, if you have children, encourage them to go to school to become city managers and city planners. Because what happens is, even the most conservative cities in America end up hiring Democrats to manage their cities, because the people who go to school to be city managers and city planners are Democrats, because Republicans don't go to work for the government. And so in all of our cities, the managers and the planners are Democrats, and we're seeing this in the implications of it. We have a guy that up north that we're working with who they had this happen in Fargo-Moorhead. Yep. They are doing this massive expansion of housing, right? And you have the primacy group, which is a Democrat group that's helping, and it looks to be maybe even no big contracts, that's helping to build these massive housing programs, right? They're going to just move voters in, right? Yep. You know, they move the nonprofits in, right? And we don't think like that. We just don't. We just don't. right?
60s hippies and now they're kids.
Right, right, and they just move them. They just move them. So anyway, so just think about that, right?
So then our taxpayer money goes to all the big new construction or?
Yep.
Yeah, if you look at that omnibus budget last year, if you look at that, and you think about, we're in the middle of COVID, our legislators approved so many amphitheaters. For amphitheaters, we can't even have, so in Minneapolis, I happen to live in Brooklyn Center, so the last few weeks I have paid attention to nothing because I live in Brooklyn Center. So we're just,
Was it a riot?
so, I mean, honestly, this is a fact. Like, I have spent the last several weeks dealing with, because I have a lot of kids who had some trauma in their life, and let's just say that, we had riots, helicopters, the streets closed off, police cars, sirens, and then 7-year-old twins and 9-year-old, and they're scared. And then we had the Shogren verdict. We know a lot of police officers, and after it happened, it's been that. And then we had COVID in one of the schools, and so everybody's on now. Oh my gosh, nobody's sick in my house, but it's like terror, because they hear all these horrible stories, even though they haven't known anybody that's been sick in a year, right? They've been told at school that like everybody could die, and so as soon as anybody has COVID, they're all like, "What if my friends die?" Even though they haven't known anybody who's been sick from it, right? And their uncle has no immune system, and he hasn't even gotten sick. So what I'm saying is like, no, this is a true story. I have a child with literally no immune system, 0 immune system. His immunologist, when he has a checkup this year, his appointment, the immunologist said they have not had a single patient, not one patient, with COVID. The immunologist hasn't had one.
The vaccine is working.
No, this is free vaccine.
Sorry.
But so what I'm saying is, that's in my city, we have just all this chaos, right? But we had a city manager who I didn't even say, he's not even my favorite guy at all, trust me. But we just had all this chaos happen, and he got fired by the city council because he said that there should be due process. The city manager, who I'm not even saying is my favorite city manager on the planet, right? But he's been there forever. When I was on the high school, he's been there for like decades. And all he said was,
Do the right thing.
there should be due process. Fired for that. Fired, right? So I'm just saying, we are in crazy, crazy times. Crazy times.
Yep.
So, but I've spent the last few weeks like doing nothing but dealing with that kind of chaos. And so I think as we're all trying to figure out how do we solve these election problems, they're creating such a craziness in our world.
Yeah.
We're like, well, how do we fix these elections? And I'm thinking, they don't want us to fix the elections.
No.
They don't even want us to think about it.
Right.
Because they want us to be so busy worrying about all this other stuff, COVID and critical race theory and sex education in the schools and condoms on cucumbers and seriously, people. I'm sorry to say it, but that's what they're talking to 4th graders about.
Breaking news.
Oh yeah.
We have something
Not a milk
more
carton.
serious. Yeah, we need the half-gallon milk cartons. We got to start putting voter pictures on here because 19,000 missing Minnesotans.
Oh my gods.
They registered in September and October and are now missing.
They registered in just this last fall before the election.
September and October.
Yeah. So for the year, in case you want to know that number, that was 39,439 lost voters.
Where did they go?
This is more serious, and it is well above the pandemic numbers. And I guarantee it's nationwide.
How many total deaths in Minnesota?
This is Minnesota.
No, but that's COVID deaths.
Yeah,
Yeah, but these are voters.
these are missing voters just that registered. So the total for the year was 39,439.
So did the voters die of COVID?
Well,
That would be the max, so no.
That was my question. How many total deaths, including COVID?
I don't have that one,
Okay.
so.
But most of those COVID deaths were before the election and all.
Right,
Before
it
you
was.
could have voted, because that's only the 45 days. You'd really have to find out more.
Yeah, because in February that number was only 6,200.
Were we allowed to see the public data about who they were before they were scrubbed from the rolls? Like,
We're
was
gonna
the
find
public?
it out, trust
I
me.
have it, yes.
Trust me when
Yeah.
I tell
You can do a file comparison.
we are
Yes, I've
going
been
to
doing that. I
find
have
it
those
all,
lists.
people. One thing that you should do. There's a movie about the Chicago Police Department. We're not popular with the Chicago Police Department. We are not popular with certain people at the state of Minnesota and certain judges and certain Democrat operatives and people like that, and people that call me horrible messages on my phone and call me awful names, and but I think here's the thing. This is our country. This is our country, and I want Democrats to know that our system is fair. I want Republicans to know our system is fair, but most importantly, I want my children to know that this system is fair. I want them to know their vote counts. I want them to know that nobody's looking to see who they voted for. And I really think the only way to do this is paper ballots and mostly in-person voting, unless you have a good reason not to do it.
Yeah.
And if we could just dip our finger in the ink like they do in other countries that stays there for a couple weeks, and you get that one vote, that's what we should do.
One day, in person.
Yeah.
This is a big deal.
It is.
See,
You know-
this is where it's fun, when I see these voter registration numbers oscillate through the whole thing. So remember when I talked about they turn voters on and off? This is where I can bust them. It's like, so you're telling me in November you reported over 60,000, and now somehow that trickled down to 58,000. Where'd they go?
What were you gonna say?
Well, even, I understand that Mexico has a voter ID card which has a photo on it. India has a voter ID card that has a photo on it.
They do the ink also.
They do the ink also. Right, so
Why can't we have this? I mean, you need ID for all these other things, to rent a movie, to open a bank account, to buy a fishing license.
Carry a gun.
To carry a gun, sure. Everything you need a license to drive a car, But why can't we have a voter ID card to vote?
I would think that we could have one card that would be even something like your passport card, not the book, but the passport card. You could use it to go to Mexico or Canada, and give it to people for free and encourage that travel, intercontinental. I mean, there's a lot of
It's
things.
harder to get your tickets to a Minnesota Twins game than it is to vote in Minnesota.
That's correct.
Especially over concessions at a
This is another thing where I was tracking the voter histories with the primary database of the received absentee, and so comparing it against the databases, there was like funny stuff where I just know that there's just such garbage. So in the accepted absentee list, I had 1,963 people that actually showed up to vote. Voted in their precinct, but we're also in the absentee accepted list. So
Does that mean they voted twice?
Not always. So some of them did, but others, somebody miskeyed it.
Oh.
So, and then, so then the other thing to look at too is when we look at the actual kind of deadlines of some of the counties. So 3 counties made no attempt to update absentee voter history before November 29th. 3 counties made 1 entry in the absentee voter history. Great effort. 20 counties only entered 5% of their absentee database records, so that was pretty good. But 9 counties did get 99% of it done. And so I want to kind of, again, of course, our hero there, Chippewa County, they're just absolutely awesome. I'm just going to tell you your county sucks. It's just easier to say it that way, because by November 29th, they got 41 of them in. That's just great work productivity, but they still had to do 4,442. So I don't think they even met expectations.
Almost one.
You would have to have Olmsted on
Yeah,
there,
we
would
do.
you?
Where's Olmsted?
I do.
The United Nations of Rochester?
Olmsted's the other way. They were only missing 3.3% of their absentee ballots. to
Missing.
enter in by November
Did
29th.
they start counting early?
They may have. So, but be careful of that, because that was still 1,751 ballots in flux.
So how many ballots did Olmsted County send out, and how many did they actually count in the election?
I don't have that with me on this
Oh,
one, but I
okay.
want to say it was really close to 54,000 ballots out and 52,000 ballots in.
Wow.
So, yep.
Wabasha County, the way I understood it, voted pretty heavily Republican.
Okay.
So would that be something shenanigans going on there with only 41 counted and yet 40?
I'm gonna say whoever's working within your county is probably not a lot. Their work ethic sucks. Because you guys should have a higher expectation and tell them, I don't care what the state law says, you're gonna get it done by November 15th.
Well, but also, here's what I'm gonna say though, this is a really important thing to say. You have to look at the voter percentage of turnout. Here, go back to that, the actual Wabasha.
Yeah.
Go to
Go
Wabasha,
vote.
and so we'd have to look at, these are the accepted, absentee, and do we have any idea what their actual voter turnout is?
Yeah, that's in a separate table.
So here's why this would matter.
Yeah.
Why this would matter is because if you have a higher voter turnout in person,
Right.
then that makes a big difference, because here's the deal. They can't cheat if you vote in person. So they can't turn they can't turn these in, because they have to see what remember, by law, your precincts have 6 weeks to turn in the data. So they can't deal with these ballots until those 6 weeks are up, because otherwise you get the double voter, right?
What's your
Because
zip code out here?
they need to know, does that make sense? Does it make sense, what I'm saying?
Don't know.
Do you all understand what I'm saying? So it could be that if you guys vote in person at a higher rate.
What's the zip code, Pastor?
55991.
991?
Yep.
Oh, one.
That's Rochester. 55991.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the percent of your population registered was 63.8%, of population voted was 56%.
So you guys are abysmal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, in Minneapolis, where there's all this voter suppression, they voted like 90%.
If you go back to the county
So you
screen,
gotta have some other zip codes down here.
Yeah, that's just a small area.
Yeah, because that's only not.
There's Wabasha up higher at 73 and 66.
Yeah.
if you go back to the county screen, what's the color coding on Wabasha? That one. What's the red and the yellow and the orange?
Okay, so anything that's in red are counties that were either at 100% did nothing, or they got 5% in. So either 0% accomplished or 5% accomplished.
And
The ones in yellow are basically the ones that were between 6% and all the way up
Rick.
to 93%.
And also, to be totally honest with you, you have to remember this too. That the cheating doesn't happen equally everywhere.
Correct.
Because they don't need to cheat everywhere. You guys have a lot smaller
Rick,
numbers, and it's
wait.
gonna be much more noticeable.
Hold up, let me ask you this question, because I know where he's going, and I'm gonna add another level to it. So-
you have two yellow colors.
Yep. So the other one here that's a little bit lighter yellow, which is really important when you look at, say, Hennepin County. So even though Hennepin County is sitting here at 3.4%, it looks like, oh, don't worry about that number, but it's significant because it's 17,830 ballots. Okay, so that's why I had to do a little bit deeper analysis where it's just like, let me look at any areas where there's more than 5,000 ballots, because if I've got 20 counties that have more than 5,000 ballots, that's 100,000 votes.
So Wabasha was in a red?
Yes, because they accomplished nothing, literally.
So
They
Ricky,
got 41 ballots done.
Your table
Maybe
says there were
complain.
4,442 missing ballots in Wabasha County, and only 41 were returned, and yet
Counted.
counted.
By November 20th.
No, entered it with the voter history.
Entered.
So there's only 41 ballots that I can definitively say those are allegedly valid,
Even now.
even at that point in time.
Yeah, right.
On November 20th,
29,
Yeah,
29.
November 29th.
5 days after state canvassing board certification.
And the turnout was only like 56%.
Right.
So people are motivated to apply for an absentee ballot, and we're expected to believe that after they're so motivated to get an absentee ballot, they don't return it and they don't participate in the election, and then the participation's so low.
No, it
It's-
just wasn't recorded.
That's what they want.
Well,
We don't
that's a
know.
corollary. Yeah, we don't know.
We don't
Yeah,
know because our voter turnout percentages are so abnormally
it's incredible.
high.
Yeah.
That this is the problem we have, that we don't actually know because they don't record them properly.
Right, okay.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
go ahead. Okay.
So those numbers you got, like, can you go back to Olmsted County?
Yep.
So Olmsted County said 51,000 accepted absentee ballots, so that means 51,000 people mailed in absentee ballots, right?
Yep, or showed up ahead of time to vote.
So Olmsted County has 168,000 people.
Correct.
So we have 50,000 people that didn't go to the polls.
No, that's not, that's it. This is the absentee side. There's
That's what
still,
I'm saying.
no, you're not. What you're saying is, I don't show the data here for the people that showed up at the precinct.
I understand that.
Yep.
So you're saying basically a third of Olmsted County
Voted absentee.
absentee ballots.
Yep.
How many people are under the age of 18 in Olmsted County would be the question. And how many people actually walked in and voted that day?
I can find out for you if you guys want to stay after. 'Cause
I'm
I have the
curious
databases
because
here.
just out of that, just, you know, you're seeing over a third, almost a third of Olmsted County.
So there's definitely places in Minnesota where statistically more people voted than should be living.
That is
in those
correct.
places.
And that's what
what
this kind of right there, this
For
kind of makes
sure.
no sense to me
No
because how many
question.
people are under the age of 18?
Right.
I mean, we're gonna see a quarter of that or just a little less?
Well, statewide, 25% of the voters that voted in the election registered in 2020 to vote.
Yeah,
That's a phenomenal
it's
number.
incredible.
So let me say that again so that you
Yeah.
make sure I didn't stutter. 25% of the ballots that were accepted and counted, those voters registered to vote in 2020. 25% were new voters in 2020.
What percentage of our population just happened to move to Minnesota?
Yeah, and that number includes people that moved from one city to another one within Minnesota, so, yep.
I don't know how this would, maybe it doesn't even show up. The house on the hill right up here,
Yep,
he received 12 absentee ballots, he never ordered one.
really?
He got 12 in there. No, he didn't use any of them. But would they show up on there somewhere as,
I only see in my data what has been received back, because they hold back the information of the ones that were requested. I could look at his address and see how many voters are allegedly registered there. If that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
So, this is an honest question, because I don't know how the mail works out. So, let me ask you a question, just because I'm curious if it's changed here. So, it used to be in Minneapolis, even until recently, we had the same mail delivery person for a very long time. Has that changed? Did you guys used to have kind of mail people and then it's changed? Like now, all of a sudden, we have different mail people all the time. But it used to be the same people all the time.
Yep.
So I'm just gonna say this to think about, because these are the things that have changed, and I think that changed partly because I think Trump changed some things at the post office, which kind of messed people up a little bit. Or somebody changed things, I don't know if it's Trump or not, somebody. But when, several years ago, there was a lot of fraud that was discovered, because the mailmen were finding fraud. Right? Good mailmen, or women, mail persons, mail people, I don't know. We're finding fraud. We're finding fraud, and they were reporting it. And so the government started doing things like they moved things to cards so that nobody would know. right? No, and nobody knows, right? Because now you don't get mail, right? They do everything online. You don't get checks in the mail, right? Stuff goes, right? Whatever. But with absentee ballots, so like, let's say credit cards. Somebody said to me, people say you should shred your garbage because they're stealing, your stuff in your garbage. And somebody I knew worked at the post office said, are you kidding me? They're actually stealing your credit cards. You don't even know you're getting them because your mail people take your offers and then they fill them out, and the same mail person actually takes the credit cards. You don't even know you filled out the application for it because they're waiting for the card that they fill out the application for. So anyways, so it's not in your garbage. They filled it out before you even got it, people. But anyways, so what I'm saying is it used to be with the same mail people. So these ballots might be stolen by the mail people before, but now the mail people aren't the same mail people because they changed the mail people. They don't give them the same routes anymore and stuff. And so just think about that when you hear these stories about people getting all these mail ballots. Because if you have a one mail person who's not going to take it, they're going to deliver it, right? So I'm just saying, just think about, because I know I was told a couple years ago that this was an issue, that sometimes there could be corrupt mail people. And we have all kinds of stories that we've heard across the country of some of this happening. So,
as an example, we actually requested absentee ballots, and we're in Rochester, Olmsted County. And between the time we requested it and before we actually got them, we discovered how corrupt Olmsted County really was.
No, it's not.
And when you got the ballot, you got the envelope, and you could tell that we were registered Republicans because there was, in the code, there was the R at the end. And so we chose to not send those or not return those absentee ballots, and we went in person on the 3rd and voted.
Very good.
It was more.
Good way.
And we did, after the fact, after we started to hear about all these irregularities, I went on to check the status of my absentee ballot after the fact to see if I actually voted twice.
yeah,
And I actually didn't. They said it was never returned.
yeah.
So that was correct.
So the person I asked about Olmsted County, there were 89,931 ballots attached to a voter history on January 31st.
So total votes for
Yep, we're,
Olmsted County?
yep, so,
30,000 in person.
yep,
That's before the purge.
yes. Yep, and then I'll get the other one here for you.
89,000.
I actually was at a meeting on Tuesday, and I brought that up about that R, and they said that.
It didn't stand, it wasn't for
No,
Republican.
it wasn't, it didn't mean Republicans, because I thought that was a.
What does it stand for then?
I can't remember
Renew or something, or
I can't remember what she said, but it
Registered.
But
It
would
has
you,
registered.
Shouldn't everybody be registered if they're sending you a ballot?
say, would you guys want to make a plug for that Tuesday morning? Would you make a plug for that Tuesday morning meeting, by the way? Because there might be people who want to attend that.
Harvest Church, is where they meet,
Free speech
9
forum.
o'clock on Tuesday mornings. And it's in the little shopping, mall, just past, on 19th Street, just past Plaza and Plaza. And it's just, they just meet in
Harvest.
one of those buildings. It doesn't
Harvest
look like a
Church.
church or anything.
It's in the park.
Conservative group.
It's the old same.
It's near Costco on the West Circle Drive somewhat. It's right in what by Whiting's Nursery. If you want to get your political fix on Tuesday mornings every week. What time does that start, Ross?
9.
9 a.m. It's a way to meet people here locally who are active, thinking.
What's the name of the group?
Free Speech Forum.
Ryan Broughton.
So
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Yep, so if you want to see examples of evidence, I will ask the cameras to be turned off to protect the innocent.
Yes.
Um,
We're going offline.
I have to